All right. We have Mike Bruesewitz joining the show here. And Mike, I appreciate you coming on. As we talked off the camera, I watched you when I was a younger kid, and it's great to have you on. I'm fired up to pick your brain a little bit here. So thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Matt. I'm excited to be here and enjoying life right now.
Good deal. And so I want to start. We'll start with your college journey and then pivot to overseas. But to start, let's go back to your days at Wisconsin. Why did you choose Wisconsin out of high school as a Minnesota kid?
So coming out of Minnesota, I had a kind of an interesting journey. Basically, when I was a junior in high school, I had a really good game against Hopkins, Minnesota, which is like the perennial powerhouse in Minnesota. The team we played against, they had 7 future Division I players. I ended up having like 20, 22 or 25. I had a really good game. My dad sent that tape out to a bunch of colleges. And about maybe a month after all that happened, I had a bunch of Big Ten offers, a bunch of Big 12 offers. And so I got Iowa, Wisconsin, like Washington State, a bunch of big schools came and offered me. And at the time, I was dealing with a lot of mid-majors when I was going in high school, when I was a junior, after having a pretty good AAU season. And I just kind of sprouted up physically, got a little bit more mature.
Sure.
I was a late bloomer in high school, didn't really get armpit hair until I was about 17. I shot up to about 6'7", so that helped out. And when I was going through the recruiting process, the biggest thing was, for me, I've always hated losing more than I've liked winning. And I just wanted to win. And so, growing up, we kind of just looked at it. I talked with my high school coach, and I took 2 visits. I went to Valparaiso, Indiana, because Homer Drew was super cool. And was really interested in Valparaiso for a couple of reasons. Homer Drew was a great coach, and they had told me that I was going to be able to play point forward for them. They said I was going to be able to bring the ball up and make plays for them. So that was really interesting for me. And then the other offer I took was in Wisconsin, or the other visit I took was Wisconsin. And the reason I took it is at the time they were like number 2 in the country. They were going to win. I think they won the Big Ten tournament that year. That was when they had Brian Butch, Michael Flowers, Trayvon Hughes was a sophomore at the time, Jason Bohannon. So they had a really, really good team. And I don't remember if they won the Big Ten that year or if they lost to Purdue. I can't remember who they won, but I'm pretty sure they won the Big Ten. But they were, number 2 in the country. That was the team that lost to Steph Curry and Davidson in the tournament. And so at the time, I was kind of looking at them like, man, this is a great opportunity to go to a big time school. And they always went to the NCAA tournament. I felt like I could kind of go in there and possibly play the wing for them because they had a lot of really good wing players usually. And I was like, okay, I play a power forward position, but I might be able to slide down to the wing and ultimately hopefully get to the NBA was my ultimate goal. So yeah, for me, that's kind of what I was trying to figure out. And after I took the visit to Valparaiso, it was just too small. I was like, I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. Can't do it. I can't do another small town. And then I wanted to, I went to visit Wisconsin and the Kohl Center was rocking. It was super cool. And I spoke to my high school coach about it and he was like, ultimately, what's your goal? Like, he's like, there's probably not going to be a better offer than Wisconsin. He's like, Mike, I really like you. I think you're a great player. Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, they're not coming for you, Mike. They're not. But Wisconsin is, and you can play in a lot of places, but I think this would be a great opportunity for you. And so ultimately, I just pulled the trigger. I wanted to win, and I wanted to go to NCAA tournaments. And Wisconsin was close enough for my family to kind of visit, but far enough away for them not to visit all the time. So also a really good thing. And if you've ever been on Wisconsin's campus, it's really hard to beat. I've been on a lot of college campuses, and Wisconsin campus is really hard to beat. And then, the education piece, a lot of people talk about it as, Wisconsin is a really high level academic school. It's very well respected in the academic community. So for me, it was great. That was kind of why I chose to be a Badger instead of, going to Minnesota or anything like that. I never ended up getting offered by Minnesota, but just because I committed super early. I committed after my junior year. So for me, that was something I was really interested in is mostly winning, and Wisconsin won at the time.
Yes. And what do you make of Wisconsin's had a lot of success getting Minnesota kids. What do you make of Wisconsin almost having more success recruiting Minnesota kids than actually Wisconsin kids?
I mean, for me, it's kind of like this interesting distance thing of like, because, Madison is where it is. It's about 4.5, 5 hour, 4.5, maybe 3.5 now. They changed the speed limit from like 65 to 75. So you can get there in about 3.5 hours now, Madison to Minneapolis. Um, but I think that's just kind of the big thing because, in Minnesota, there's not a huge like Gopher pride population. Like the University of Minnesota it's a big campus. It's in the middle of downtown, Minneapolis. And for me, going to Minnesota was never like, oh yeah, I can't wait to be a Gopher. There's not really that kind of draw or pull to that program. And I think Wisconsin is just far enough away for guys to be like, oh yeah, I went away to college. I didn't stay home to go to college. And the other thing is the campus is so beautiful there. That I think that's a big thing too. And then the other thing is winning. When I had gone there, Bo Ryan had really had it rolling. The program was rolling when I was there. My 4 years, we went to an NCAA tournament, and that kind of success continued to breed itself. And for me as a Minnesota kid, it was just like, man, I want to go win, and that was the biggest thing. Is Minnesota, the Gophers, like their program just kind of doesn't have that same prestige that Wisconsin has had. Their last real big success was they went to the Final Four in I think it was 2000s. I actually have a couple of mentors who played on that team. A guy named John Thomas, who played at Minnesota back in the day. And those guys, they all kind of said like, oh yeah, if you win in Minnesota, it's great, but they weren't really winning, and the program really wasn't doing super well. So that was kind of a big thing for me. And Wisconsin is. It's a great place to go play basketball. It's a great place to go attend university. Because here's the deal: you Scotties are nuts. You guys are just a different breed of human, in the best and worst way possible.
No, I get that. Like hands down, each year the drunkest state in the country. So yeah, we have
like the top 20 of the top 20 drunkest cities. Yeah, top drunkest 20 cities. Wisconsin has at least 10 or 11 of them in the top 20. So yeah, it's a different place. It's a beautiful place.
Yes,
it's just different.
Especially in the summer. The campus. Like right now, I imagine the guys are enjoying life right now in the summer. In the winter, you're a Minnesota guy. You notice like get a little depressing after a while. But as a basketball player, maybe not. But right now, it's hard to beat.
The winters are rough. So you are 100% correct on that. The winters are rough.
Yeah, January to like April. January to April, it gets a little old. You get Christmas time, you feel good a little bit, but then afterwards, it's like, yeah, the next 4 months. I could see myself one day being a snowbird. Summers in Wisconsin, maybe going down to a warmer state. That's the goal.
Yeah, but I moved down to Puerto Rico for a reason. I'm tired of seasons. I don't need winter anymore. I'm good.
Sure. Yeah, you got your fixing. Mm-hmm. So
definitely have.
Yeah, my next question for you is what transition was tougher for you? Going college to overseas or high school to college?
Definitely high school to college. So for me, kind of transitioning to a college game. So kind of just to give some background, when I was growing up in Minnesota, I was very fortunate to play for a man named Chris Carr. Chris Carr played in the NBA for 8 years, or maybe 6. And one of his biggest claims to fame is he lost to Kobe in the dunk contest back in the early 2000s, late 90s. But I was super fortunate. He had built a gym in Minnesota. And I played one of his teams when I was like 15, and I absolutely destroyed his 15U team. And then basically him and his staff and his coaches were like, don't let that big redhead leave the gym without us talking to him. And Chris recruited me to go to his program, his AU program. And by far the best decision I'd ever made basketball wise. Chris was an unbelievable trainer. And so I had been working out and training with an NBA trainer as well as with NBA players when I was growing up. By the time I was 16, I was training with Chris Humphreys, big power forward. He played in the NBA for like 10 years. He went to the University of Minnesota, playing with a guy named John Thomas, played in the NBA for 5 or 6 years. a couple of different Timberwolves guys, Troy Hudson. So I was in a gym with NBA guys from the time I was 16. And I was super fortunate to have that opportunity. I basically went to basketball school from the time I was 16 to 18 for 3 straight summers. And my game was very predicated on the professional game. Being able to make reads, being able to make pivots, hold the ball a little bit longer, be a little bit more individual. So, and going from that to being into a college system, which, yes, you need to have individual skill, but at the end of the day, it's all about your system. It's all about the team. And that is just what a lot of universities are. That's the college game is extremely different than the professional game. It's much slower, a lot more physical in terms of what you can get away with in the paint, in terms of, grabbing and everything like that. It's pretty physical in that aspect. And then just how hard guys play on defense all the time. So those are some things that were different. So I had a much more difficult time transitioning from high school to college. Also the size, just that transition of length, especially going from, high school to high major basketball. You don't see 7-footers all the time, or 6'8", 6'6", 6'7" with, 7-foot wingspan. So that was probably the biggest transition for me, was figuring out how to deal with all that length and that different size, as well as just the different style, the different play style. One thing for me in my game is it's really predicated on my IQ and basketball savvy. And so kind of just learning how to deal with all that really was probably the biggest challenge. And then, the weight room, you're going from being an 18-year-old or 17-year-old, 18-year-old to being the biggest, most physical guy on the floor in high school, to all of a sudden you go there and there's another 6'8" dude who's 240. And you're like, oh, I haven't seen that a whole lot. Like, that's me, but I can't really move you the way I want to move you with my shoulder. So those were probably the biggest transitions. And then it was funny, like after I got done playing in school and I went to play my first year overseas, I played on a super high level team, a Euro Cup team called Hapoel Jerusalem. So I was playing in Israel, and that transition was, for me, way easier. It was funny. I kind of felt like I was free and I could go and play and do what I wanted to do because, it was a different system. It was much more individualistic as the professional game. You got to play faster, and you got to constantly be making plays. So I felt like that fit my game a lot better. So I was, after I got done with school, I was like, oh, I'm free. I can fly. I can, do things that I would like to do and I have to do to continue to get paid to play the game. So definitely high school to college was much more difficult.
I'm going to ask an overseas question right now, actually. What in your game do you think you've improved on the most or changed the most since your time in Madison? And I'll just say one thing that I noticed from watching your highlights is your fluidity with the basketball, like weaving in and out, just handling the ball and weaving in and out. It looks very fluid. It looks very smooth. Did you have that in your game at Wisconsin? Was it, maybe in the team setting you couldn't show that skill, or was that something you developed? And so, yeah, my first question is, did you have that in your game? Was that something you developed? And 2, what do you think you've improved on most since college?
All right. So the first question of, did I have that fluidity in my game? Yes, I did. And I had that before I showed up to college. And I used to, when I was in AAU, like my coaches gave me the ball a lot. I was, used to playing a lot more like a point forward when I was in high school. What had happened is I went to college and they immediately said, we need to put 15 to 20 pounds on you so you can play power forward. And for me, as I have gotten older and as I have improved, my strength and conditioning routine has improved drastically. One of the biggest things for me is going to college and going to school. And what I recommend to a lot of guys now is you need to really think about where you're going to play and the style of play you want to go and play in. So the Big Ten is super rigorous. It's big, it's physical. It's kind of a drag them out, punch them out type of league. You got big power forwards. You got big centers. And even though the game has changed in the NBA, in college, for me, the Big Ten has remained relatively the same. If you watch a Big Ten game from the last 5 years or from 15 years ago, the style really hasn't changed that much. And so for me, going to school, like we had our strength and conditioning coach, and he had came from a football program. He had came more from a football background, and kind of how Coach Ryan wanted to have us look and be was to handle the rigors of the Big Ten, to handle that physical play. Because when I was in school, I had to go against Derek Nix. I don't know if you remember Derek Nix. He was about 6'10", 6'11", and maybe 330 pounds. He had about 100 pounds on me. Yeah. And I got to deal with that on the glass. Like you got to be able to rebound with those guys. And so for me, that was kind of the biggest thing, is going there. They put on a lot of weight. I put on, I think, 10 to 15 pounds. And I lost a lot of my fluidity and a lot of my athleticism, that, not necessarily my vertical athleticism, but more my horizontal and lateral athleticism. Sure. That for me was, something that I had when I was younger, and then going to school, just being in a Big Ten, it's kind of like you got to survive there. You gotta, adapt to what the play style is. And so for me, I had lost a lot of that because we had spent so much time in the weight room, and the way we lifted was way heavier. It was much more of a football style lifting than an actual like athletic basketball style. And it's kind of interesting when they had ended up making a change at the physical, we changed the weight or the strength and conditioning coach from Scott Hettenbach to Eric. I want to say his name was Holland or something. The guy who got dismissed a few years ago, but he came from the Bulls practice. He came from being an NBA trainer. And if you really noticed, I did specifically because, I kind of had my gripes with our strength and conditioning coach about how we should lift and everything. And if you saw, there was a huge difference in how the guys looked from one year to the next after they got rid of Scott Hettenbach. They got leaner, they got longer, they got more athletic. They just looked more fluid. And I'd say for them, that is something that happened to me in college, as I got kind of bulky and just heavy, and my ball handling kind of left, and as well as just the ability to consistently shoot. My shooting was atrocious in college. I will say that. And so for me, as I have improved, like going forward, I have sought out different strength and physical strength and conditioning trainers. I've spent a lot of time learning ballet. I've spent the last 10 years practicing Pilates, yoga. So I've really changed my physical strength routine and workout routine in that sense over the last 10 years, which has drastically improved my training regimens, which has improved my physical abilities, my fluidity, my athleticism laterally. So that has definitely helped me is finding those other athletic practices and adapting those to being a basketball player, which has really helped my fluidity. And I would say overall, my biggest strengths that I've changed to since I've left college, my IQ has continued to rise just because I've played so much basketball. So that's been helpful. But really just consistency in shooting. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've been pretty close to, or if not at 40% from shooting, and just overall being able to run a team, understanding understanding how to break a game down has probably been my biggest improvement, of just understanding, hey, I got these 4 minutes that I got to kind of just chill and get my certain guys shots. Okay, these next 2-3 minutes, hey, I got to be really aggressive and try and make plays for guys. All right, this is a minute or two I can catch my breath, try and figure some stuff out. Hey, let's chill back, and then how to close out games. So,
okay, no, there's a lot of good stuff to unpack there. A few different questions popped into my mind when you were talking there. One is just you mentioned how the Big Ten is still the same physical Big Ten, and I do not to get ranting on this. I do think that kind of hurts the Big Ten come tournament time. You get used to that style, or teams get worn down, or whatever. I just think that has something to do with the Big Ten's lack of success in recent years. But do you watch? Do you still watch college basketball? Do you still watch Wisconsin a decent amount?
From time to time. For me, like this year, so I had a couple surgeries this year. So when I was chilling on the couch up in Ohio, my family moved up there a couple years ago. So I was recovering from surgery. We would watch some basketball. We would watch the Big Ten stuff, and it's pretty brutal. I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty rough to watch right now. And just overall college basketball, like it's okay to watch. I don't mind it from time to time, but since I have really been just a student of the professional game, because the professional game and the college game are two different worlds. They are not really comparable. Just because of just the style. The longer shot clock changes things. The pace of the game is way different. And so for me, I watch college every once in a while, and I'll watch the tournament. I'll watch some Big Ten tournament. I'll watch ACC tournaments, stuff like that. And then, NCAA tournament, I'll tune into some games just to see, guys that are going to come into the NBA and everything like that. But for me, I spend most of my time watching NBA games. And quite a few overseas games. So I'll watch some EuroLeague, during the year. Like my YouTube channels are all NBA, EuroLeague, Euro Cup highlights is usually what it is. And I got some friends or some old teammates that are playing somewhere. I'll check out what they're doing. But college, not so much.
Okay. Well, I was just going to mention that I noticed like Wall and Crowell, like Wisconsin kind of it was an ugly season. There's really no other way around it. But they would feed Wall and Crowell in the post like a ton. 2 Minnesota guys, but they would feed them in the post, and then it's just like, they're posting up, and I don't even know what post defense really is anymore, because it feels like you can do really whatever you want in the post, especially in the Big Ten. And it's just you feed the ball, and they pound their shoulders at dudes who are just hanging on them, putting all their weight, pushing them. I don't really understand Big Ten or just post defense in general anymore. Like if you can get away with whatever you want to get away with, play that way. But like playing straight up doesn't make any sense anymore. What do you think?
Defense. I mean, like it's kind of the thing in the Big Ten. It's that mentality of like, we can kind of beat you up and do what you need to do. And the times I have watched college games is, for me, it's really hard for me to watch it because the concepts of spacing. Guys, like there are times where we got guys in the wrong spot. And in Wisconsin, like I would say Wisconsin, like Greg Gard does a good job of teaching spacing in terms of, hey, this is where you need to be. But the next step and the biggest thing or the biggest improvement can come is, okay, I'm in the right spot now. When the ball leaves this guy's hand, what's the next spot I got to get to in case this goes here? Or, hey, my defender I'm in the corner. My defender turns his head. Now I need to lift 4 feet. And it's super simple. It's like 4 feet. It's 2 steps. All of a sudden, if you lift 2 steps out of the corner, you get an open shot instead of some guys just stay in the corner because, hey, this is where I'm supposed to space. And that's kind of the biggest thing is, one is with Wisconsin, but it was with a ton of teams. I watched Wisconsin play the University of Minnesota a couple times, and I was like, bro, they're sitting in the corner, but they need to move like 3 feet up. Yeah. Their spacing is horrible right now. Because you stand in the corner doesn't mean you're correctly spaced. And that is kind of the biggest thing I have noticed with college basketball is just the understanding of how to use space to your advantage and where to move after the ball has moved. And in terms of the post defense stuff, I think, if you kind of looked at Wisconsin's team last year, Tyler Wall was kind of that point forward for them along with Chucky Hepburn. So they were their 2 main playmakers. And then, they wanted to have Stephen Crowell come out and be another playmaker for them just at a different entry point. So they had him at the elbows a lot as well as in the post. And, for me, I would love to see him not necessarily because he does a lot of backing down with his right hand, very specifically right hand, left shoulder. He wants to get to that right hand hook. And for me, he just didn't seem comfortable enough to catch and face up. And that is another kind of aspect of spacing and understanding the game as you get older. It's like, hey, I can face up and I can create space for myself within this 3-4 foot area to make sure I shift the guy so I don't have to hit him with my shoulder 4 times. I want to pivot, turn his hips so he goes there. So he opens up his foot, like he opens a foot lane for me. And then all of a sudden I only have to hit him once with my shoulder and I can get where I need to. Whereas that's just kind of what they do is, those guys are really comfortable backing those guys down, but that's just, something that they're going to do. And, that's what, Coach Gard found to be some success and what he thought would be the best thing for them to be successful. And, overall, like the biggest thing for Wisconsin this year is what I did watch. I think I watched probably 8 or 9 games. It was a lot of just execution down the stretch. And I think it wasn't necessarily just Coach Gard not being able to drop the correct plays. Cause I remember a few different times they would talk and like, there would be a shot or a set or something that would happen. And you would look at Coach Gard and he'd be like, that's not what I drew up, guys. Like, he'd be like, that's not what I told you guys to do. And so there's kind of that disconnect of like, hey, Coach Gard has to be able to be a better communicator or hold guys to a higher standard for them to continue to execute. And, some of that's on the coach, some of that's on the players, but it's in the middle somewhere. It's not just on one. So I think for Badger Nation, you got to understand he's got 18 to 22-year-old kids that he's trying to get execute things, and they're not going to be the same every day. Whereas I'm 32 now. I have a much different demeanor in my day and in my games, and I'm much more consistent just because my brain is fully developed. I'm not trying to figure out who I am, and there's just like a different level of consistency as you get older that younger players don't have. And that's kind of the biggest challenge with college basketball is you got to try and rein in 18 to 22-year-olds and, hey, I need you to be consistent, even though, their brains, their life, everything is a lot of inconsistency.
Yeah. And no, you're spot on. There was a lot of execution issues down the stretch. I feel like the good news is they got a ton of experience because every game they played this year was close. So they have that experience. And now the biggest thing for me is like, there was a lot of scoring droughts. And I think sometimes it just comes from personnel and missing pieces. And I think they might have potentially remedied that by getting AJ Storr in the portal, who's a high-level athlete who will be able to get easy buckets. Easy buckets are a good thing. Maybe getting to the hoop and being able to beat your defender late in or get to your mid-range, whatever it is. I think he'll provide that. And then Gus Bus, the freshman, I think those two can come in and help remedy, the 6-7 minute scoring droughts. And because I feel like Wisconsin just consistently gets good looks. Like they get a lot of open looks compared to other teams, and it's just whether does the personnel can they hit it. And I feel like this past year they had some missing pieces. But then that leads me to my next question, and talking about some scoring droughts. And I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but that 2012-13 team, your senior year, that was one of my favorite teams ever to watch. Actually, and I'll explain why. I mean, there's a lot of ugly games. Like there were the scoring droughts, but you guys were like defensively, you were very solid defensively, rebounding, attention to detail. It just was hitting shots, and it was a very bizarre year. Like it's hard to explain, but you guys like could beat anybody, especially when you would hit a few shots. Like the team would hit a few shots. You beat Michigan twice, who might have been the most talented team in the country. Or you could say Indiana was the most talented team in the country. You beat them twice. You beat them on the road to the Big Ten tournament. And there were games where there were droughts and stuff. And at the same time, like you could beat anybody, but then you could be in a dogfight with the team that's very average or get upset by an Ole Miss. And then another aspect that was interesting is like I swear that season – some of the best dunks in Wisconsin history happened, like easily. I have never seen a year where there were this many dunks. You had one against Nebraska, went down the lane, and you postered the dude early on in the game at Nebraska. You had Ryan Evans against Ohio State. I think Evans had a few more. Decker had one against Illinois.
Victor
Oladipo, Burke. He had a Penn State dunk where he spun and he dunked. It was just a wild year. It was just like – you guys could beat anybody. You could be in a dogfight with an average team. You would have scoring droughts, but then when you would hit shots, you'd beat teams. Just what do you remember of that year? What were your thoughts on that season? And did I paint a good picture of that for you?
Yeah, a little bit. So the thing that we got to premise is in the beginning of the year, we had 2 major injuries. So I was the first major injury, and a lot of people don't really know this. Is like, but I had a really big cut, so I ended up landing on the back of on the counterweight of the basket in practice, about 10 days before our opening preseason game. And I had emergency surgery and I had 50 stitches. I literally cut my leg all the way to my bone. And the university did kind of some weird stuff, and they told me not to say anything, and they kind of covered some stuff up, and they didn't release pictures, and it was a real weird situation for me. So I had 50 stitches, years. And I had a giant hole in my leg the whole season, which they kind of were like, nah, he just got a cut. And I was like, no, that thing was about a foot long and all the way down to my bone. And I was not the same player. Afterwards, I had lost a ton of my conditioning. I didn't have any legs underneath me the rest of the year. It's funny. The reason I got a little bit better in the second half of the year is because I had a concussion and I had to sit out for 2 weeks where I couldn't do anything. So I let my body heal a little bit. So I had a super major injury. I probably should have redshirted, but kind of me being hard-headed and knowing I can do what I can do, it's like, nah, I'm going to do this. And then I think 5 days after that, I'm sitting in practice and Josh Gosher tore his ACL. And Josh had been moved over to point guard for us. And so we had, that was the year after Jordan Taylor left. So we had a guy named George Marshall, Trayvon Jackson, Ben Brust, and Josh Gosher. Those were our guys that were coming in to play point guard for us or had the opportunity. And Ben really couldn't play point guard. Ben couldn't dribble. Ben was not a good dribbler, so he was not really going to play point guard for us. So it was between Josh, George Marshall, and Trey Jackson. But Trey was more of a two guard at the time, and Josh had came into camp and in the preseason and he was stirring the drink. We'll put it that way. Josh was great as a point guard. He was big. He was making passes. He was making plays, and our offense was going really well. And myself included, like I had spent all summer working on my jump shot. Like the year before, I had shot the ball horribly, and I had spent all summer. I was in the gym every day, putting 400 or 500 threes up a day. So I was shooting. Pardon my friends. I was shooting the shit out the ball in camp prior to being hurt. And so we had all this kind of stuff going on. And so we had these two big injuries that happened. And I had drastically changed my game then at that point. I couldn't shoot. I didn't have a lot of legs. My physical abilities were just I was probably about 80% most of the year. So we had kind of an interesting start to the year. And then what ended up happening is I came back from injury and we kind of figured out like, all right, offensively, there are going to be nights where we're going to struggle. One, because I wasn't a great outside shooter at that point, and Ryan Evans wasn't going to be able to step out to three. He was more of a 16 to 18 foot guy. But we also had young Sam Decker who could come in and make plays at times, but he wasn't physically super ready to carry the load like he did his sophomore and junior year. He was still kind of figuring out the rigors of the Big Ten, and he would have nights and you'd be like, man, this dude is super talented. He's just physically, he just wasn't ready to do it night to night. He could do it on some nights, but being consistent at 18 years old, super difficult, but he was great. So, we had those times where offensively we would struggle because our two guards, like we had Trey Jackson and George Marshall, and we kind of early in the year, we couldn't figure out who our point guard was. And then that was kind of our bigger struggles in the beginning of the year. And then we also had just some struggles shooting wise. If we knocked down shots, we were really tough. But one thing for our team is we knew we'd hang our hat on is toughness. A lot of that was kind of led by me, just being like, hey, we're going to get stops. We're going to have to play defense. We're going to have to do this. And what made us really difficult is just how big we were. I was playing the 3-4. Ryan was playing the 3-4. Berg was one of the all-time leading shot blockers before Frank Kaminsky. People forget, like Jared Bergen was an all Big Ten defender, super good rig protector. So for us defensively, we were kind of a nightmare because we could switch 80% of stuff. Like if it was me and Ryan, we switched at 6'7" to 6'7", and we didn't really lose a lot. And then all of a sudden we switched with Jared Bergen, and he was capable laterally to hang out with guards outside. But we would try and funnel everything to him. Trey Jackson is about 6'3", 6'4". So he was coming in and we had that. And Ben Brust was not a great on-ball defender, but that dude worked his butt off in terms of chasing shooters and everything like that. And he turned into a solid defender for us. So defensively, we had kind of figured out about halfway through the year, that was going to be our identity of, hey, we're going to get stops. We're going to be super hard to score on. And that kind of led to a lot of dogfights. When you have a defensive identity, not always are you going to get to go and blow teams out that you should. And so that was kind of our up and down year, but it was super fun. We got to beat Michigan on that crazy shot by Ben Brust to send it into overtime. I very vividly remember going into Indiana where they were number 2, and we just kind of out-toughed them. We just kind of punked them. They wanted to be much more finesse. They wanted to do that, and we, I will give credit to our coaching staff on those big games. Like, I would say, out of everybody in the Big Ten, we had always been the most prepared defensively for every team. It was without a doubt, we knew what they were doing. And part of that was our coaching staff prepping us. And then another part was just, hey, me, Jared, and Ryan, defensively, we were super connected, so we could blow up almost anything they wanted to do. You want to do this? Great. We're not going to let you. You're going to have to figure something else out. So that was something for our team that we did a great job with. And, what happened in the NCAA tournament is we ran into a really hot team. Like, people forget, like, Ole Miss had went on, like, I think they won like their last 12 games. And they had kind of figured some stuff out. They had 2 really big players that were super athletic, named Murphy Holloway or I think it was Brandon Murphy. Or their center was basically an all SEC center. They're a power forward. He's played in Euro Cup high level stuff. He was super high level. And then Marshall Henderson is just like a gunner. And we shut him. We did an okay job on him in the first half, but we got killed on the glass in the first half. And then in the second half, he got loose a couple of times and knocked down a couple shots, and we just didn't shoot the ball that well that day. And that's kind of what happens in the tournament. But I do remember that year. It was crazy. We had a lot of dunks, a lot of crazy games, a lot of ups and downs. It was real interesting because we had so much turmoil, especially in the beginning of the season, with just injuries. We kind of got decimated by injuries that year, but still were able to come back and make sure we made the tournament and everything like that. So it was fun. I remember it was fun. It was heartbreaking at the end, but it was also like some relief at the end too. I was like, all right, cool. We got to the tournament. We didn't get to where we needed to, but it was still a real interesting and fun year of basketball.
Yeah, I know. And you guys were still a 5 seed, a top 25 team. I mean, that's not easy to do in college basketball. There's 350 teams. So no, that was, yeah. And you guys just run it. Ole Miss was a really, really tough physical. They were a good team. And that was just probably the worst draw you could have got. Usually you want a mid-major in a 5-12 matchup versus, a team that won 12 in a row. So a few years ago, a similar thing happened with Oregon, where Oregon was super hot. They were super athletic, and they won like 12 straight or something similar to that. So that was just a bad luck of the draw partially too. And you had a role. I think this will be my last question about Wisconsin, but you had a big role for the last 3 years, and you had a role your freshman year. You got some minutes your freshman year. You played in a lot of crazy games, a lot of ups and downs. I think the Ohio State game you played a big role. You had that shot at the top of key late in the game, the pump fake pass shot. The Michigan game, the Kansas State game, you hit a pull-up 3 with like a minute left in the tournament.
In transition. It was fun.
Yeah, exactly. So what game do you look back most fondly of?
I would say when we played Ohio State at home, it was like a mid-afternoon game. It was I think it was the NBC or ABC game. That was super fun. Just like the overall atmosphere was just different. Like I remember waking up for that game because they were 24-0. They hadn't lost yet. It was a Saturday game. I remember we had I think it was like a 1 or a 2 o'clock start. So we had an early shoot around. We went to breakfast, and then, it's cool because when you go to breakfast at the Kohl Center, we always are up top on the second level. And so you get to see over the Kohl Center front lawn, and we're eating breakfast, and all of a sudden we just see this mob of kids and people show up to the Kohl Center to get their tickets and get in line to get to the stadium. And it's like, it's cold outside. Like it's it's like 10, 15 degrees, and they're all bundled up. And, I just remember that very specifically. And I remember I came down and, I left breakfast, and usually we go all the way down to the other level to go to our scooters or wherever, to the third level. And we went to the middle level to where all the students were. And I remember I just popped my head out and I said, hey, thank you guys so much for coming. We're going to make sure we take care of you guys tonight and have a good time. And, I also really remember in that game, it was so loud. That was by far the loudest stadium I've ever been in. Played in a lot of arenas and everything
Wow.
like that. But when we went on our run, because we were down 15 in the second half. So I very specifically remember we're going on our run. Jordan had snapped, like Ryan Evans hit the first shot to kind of get us going. Jordan snapped off like 8 straight for himself. I ended up hitting 2 threes in that run. And I remember after I grabbed the offensive rebound in between Buford and Sullinger and put it back up and finished it, and they called a timeout. And we go to the huddle and like nobody can hear anything. Like Coach Ryan's saying stuff. I have no idea what he's saying. Like it doesn't even matter what he's saying at that point. We're like, all right, cool. Like we don't know what you're saying. And then I really specifically remember we got into a huddle. It was me, Jordan, John Lure, I think Keaton Nankiville and Josh Gosser. And we're like, hey, whatever happens, we're getting stops. We're going to get buckets. We're going to win this game. And we're going to go have some fun tonight. And like that was what Jordan said to us. And I very specifically remember that. And that was maybe with like 6 minutes left in the game. And yeah, that game was super fun. The other one that I really remember that I was probably most proud of was when we went to Indiana when they were number 2 my senior year. And we beat them and took care of them on their home floor. Because to this day, I did not lose to Indiana in my college career. That was the only team. I believe I did not lose to my whole college career.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we beat them all 4 years. Every year I was there, we never lost to them. For me, that was super cool because Indiana is a super prestigious program, and like the first 2 years they weren't very good, but my last 2 years they were super good.
Yeah,
they were top 15 in the country every year. So yeah, I would say those 2 were by far 2 are like my more favorite games.
Sure.
That I very specifically remember.
Yeah, and those 2 Indiana teams, they Oladipo and Zeller were top 5 picks, I believe, both of them, and then they had a lot of other like experienced talent around them. Those were.
Yeah, I was gonna say those were tough teams. Yeah, people don't know, like Christian Wofford played super high level European basketball for a long time. Jordan Hall's super high level player for a long time in Europe. Like a lot of these guys went over and made a lot of money playing basketball professionally for a lot of years. And so that whole roster was super talented. And it was fun to kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, that guy played here. I played against him in this country and stuff like that. So,
that is cool. That is cool. Yeah. So I lied. I'm going to ask one more question about your time at Wisconsin. Can you give me a good Bo Ryan story?
What kind of Bo Ryan story do you want?
Any that pops to your mind. Just let it fly.
Well, let me think.
All right.
He okay, a couple things. Super superstitious dude. People, it's super superstitious. Like when we fly on planes, he would always be in the very back of the plane. Every trip, did not matter what flight we were doing. He said, no, if anybody would sit there, it'd be a problem because and his whole reason was, have you ever seen a plane back into a crash? I was like, oh, all right, cool.
It's true.
We would always stay at the same hotels in places.
Okay.
Always. It was like, hey, we go there, we're staying in that same hotel. Hey, we do that. He always had his like little idiosms too of just like,
sure.
He would always do that. And then to this day, all of our exit meetings, like at the end of the season, no matter what they were just him telling stories.
Sure.
About whatever, not even basketball related. Times was in Chester, Pennsylvania, or hey, I played golf with this guy, and we're like, well, what is this exit meeting? Are we going to talk about what I need to improve on, or anything like that, or what's this? Nope, not a thing. It was just him wanting to talk to you. Okay, sounds good.
No, I appreciate that. No, I like that. I have to agree with him though. I might. I'm going on a flight in these next few days. I might take that strategy in the next few days.
He's not wrong. He's definitely not wrong.
No.
I was just like, all right, man. Like, if a plane crashes, where you are. Like,
yeah. There's.
I get
not
it.
Too much.
I get it. If you run into a mountain, the back of the plane is gonna have just as many problems as the middle of the plane. But so be it.
Yeah. So